the Fred Warner extension and admission from the 49ers that they messed up with DeForest Buckner? Ben.
Yes, I think it is. To me, I think it's not just it is the Fred Warner extension that defines this definitely, but it's kind of a combination of a ton of things where the 49ers drafted Fred Warner, right? That's the reason you see all the stuff now. And when people bring up the whole DeForest Buckner situation, they always say, oh, this wasn't the regime that drafted him and all this kind of stuff. But I don't understand not trying to pay the best player at their position. I'm just not. I'm not in the business of letting go of the best players at their position potentially. So when the 49ers did make the DeForest Buckner trade, I didn't really understand it at the time. I think they got decent value, but at the same time, if you look at the deal they ended up making with Eric Armstead, it's not vastly different from what DeForest Buckner is making now. And with the reality that the 49ers have Trey Lance as their future quarterback, that would have solved the DeForest Buckner issue, which is really funny now to look back onto. So I think them paying Fred Warner, and we're going to see this over the next few years with the 49ers. Debo is going to be up for a contract. Nick Bosa is going to be up for a contract. I would be willing to bet that this regime is going to pay those players rather than pass on them again, even though I know some people here might have a different opinion on that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how this was all going to play out with Fred Warner after DeForest Buckner. And like you touched on, Ben, this regime obviously didn't draft Buckner, but he was really the first sample to see how they might handle big contracts in terms of if they're going to pay guys that are top three at their position, or if they're just going to try to move on from them and get more value. Garoppolo, he wasn't as established as the other guys. Of course, they made him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league at the time. But Buckner, he got traded. Then you had George Kittle. They brought him back. So like you talked about, Ben, they are paying their own guys. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens down the road with Debo Samuel when his contract comes up. I think Nick Bosa is a lock for them to bring back. But touching on if this specific deal with Warner has anything to do with how they handle the Buckner situation, I think it might. I don't have a strong stance on it either way, but the possibility is definitely there.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that this is an admission that they messed up with DeForest Buckner. I mean, they definitely messed up on that whole deal. That's a guy that they could have easily kept if they had just decided to do it. I think what it is the whole deal with Buckner is they don't value the defensive tackle position as strongly as they do other places. So that's why they made the move. They value the linebacker position more. And, Warner has the ability to do multiple things for them, which I think is the difference between those two players. But what's funny about it is we say that as far as, they don't value the defensive tackle. But when you have a conversation with anybody regarding whether the 49ers should have kept Buckner or Armstead, the argument always becomes, well, Armstead struggles because he doesn't have everybody around him. He wasn't able to play defensive tackle as much because they didn't have the end to let him kicked out inside. So they're paying Armstead to be a defensive tackle basically, and that's at the sixth highest rate in the NFL when they could have done it for $2 million more and had an all-pro level player there. It was definitely a mistake on their part, and they could have structured that contract very similarly to what they did with Fred Warner, because he had an extra year left on his contract. It would have been very similar.
Yeah, I like what Jack said. They just don't value the defensive tackle position that highly, and I think that's where that's the one thing I'll ever admit that this whole move was wrong in 49ers is that, okay, you looked at the position, but you didn't look at the player. You didn't look at the leader. You didn't look at the impact that he was making. You didn't look at the healthy seasons versus the guy who you kind of just, took just a little bit levels off of money. Well, Jack said you could just kicked over into $1 million plus more, and you could have still had the same more impactful player, which imagine if he was with the 49ers in 2020, that's probably like an extra win right there for them. But I think they're both still in a way they're exclusives in terms of, they saw, because if it was an admittance, it'd be almost like maybe I'm seeing it a little more reaching. It's just in a way that they probably would have foresaw Fred Warner was already going to be this type of caliber player, which after 2019 season, when they did trade DeForest Buckner, Warner looked great in 19, but that was mainly for half or 2/3 of the season, mainly, especially once Quan Alexander went out with that injury, that Warner started to storm onto the scene. So I think in this case, the guy just blossomed into such a phenomenal player that I was like, all right, we need to sign this guy. It's too obvious. He does so much for us. We can blitz him. He can come up for the run. He's a leader and do all this such. And again, the positional value in terms of how they weight their own, their own value in terms of, we love linebackers. We love the guy who can remove the middle of the field and take a number 3, number 4, whatever, the running back, and it's all gravy from there. So I think you could probably sniff around, maybe see it's like that, but I think they're both exclusive.
I don't think the Niners have admitted that they made a mistake with Buckner. I think they're still clinging to the stance that they made the right call. I think what they believe is that no defensive tackle not named Aaron Donald is worth $20 million a year. I think that's their stance, and they're not going to change. I think maybe they're right about that. I think Buckner's worth it, but maybe they're right. What they're not right about is giving the contract they gave to Eric Armstead. You don't have to. It wasn't an either or situation. You could have let them both go. You could have traded them both. I still say bring back Buckner. They didn't do that. They had their reasons. I don't think they would actually admit to being wrong there, at least until. Because, I mean, look, Javon Kinlaw could be really good this year. Who knows? So I don't see it as an admission yet. I think this is more along the lines of what they did with Kittle. It's someone they drafted, someone they developed, and someone they're proud of. And he's not making $20 million a year. He's making 19. It's a lot different. It's a whole $1 million, right?
Well, and the funny thing, Brian, is you just said they didn't want to play defense or pay a defensive tackle $20 million. They're paying Eric Armstead $20 million.
I know. That's the funny thing.